it, that little marketing twink, Be Better.
I cannot believe he put that on the internet.
At the expense of Black and brown people. And or women.
Be Better has a habit of targeting women and POC.
They smeared this influencer as a racist and chased him off TikTok. But turns out he was right all along. We're going to break down a crazy cancel culture story from the world of TikTok and so much more on today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast, my daily show where I take on the craziest ideas from across our politics, media, and the internet, all from an independent perspective. Guys, as you can probably tell if you're watching me or even listening to me, I'm still on the road, coming live to you, or not live, but coming to you from a hotel room in London. We're wrapping up the last few days of our trip here and headed to a Chelsea game tonight, which is so exciting. It's been a lifetime dream of mine to finally get to see him. And then we'll be headed back home and back to our usual business later this week. But I did want you guys to have a Monday episode, so recording this from the hotel room for you all today. Anyway, up first, we've got to talk about the interesting story of the TikTok influencer Be Better. He's a Canadian TikToker with a background in marketing who made it big over the last year or so. I watched his videos. They're pretty interesting, doing these deep dives, 5 to 10 minutes, where he goes into the downfall of various celebrities and influencers, their products, their brands, their career implosions, all through a marketing perspective, and explains what they did wrong and criticizes their different choices and strategies and products and all the different things they've done in these deep dives that are super popular.
Hi, so I have a master's degree in business, and today I'm going to use it to analyze the glorious downfall of Blake Lively.
But back in August, he made the mistake of daring to criticize then candidate Kamala Harris and her marketing strategy.
Hi, so I have a master's degree in business, and today I'm going to use it to analyze the marketing strategy of Kamala Harris's campaign, and ultimately why I believe if she continues with the horrible marketing strategy she has been employing, why she will ultimately end up losing the presidency to Donald Trump.
So even though he's a very liberal guy, he actually applied to work on the Marianne Williamson campaign, a far-left Democratic primary challenger to Biden. He was ruthlessly attacked, smeared as racist, and hounded off of TikTok.
I cannot believe he put that on the internet. I thought that he was smart enough to understand that that was a horrible decision. It was so poorly done, poorly thought out, and you came for the wrong group at the wrong time.
Really bad points that showed he had no understanding of politics in the United States and also communication, and some of his points were just downright offensive. So
Can y'all please learn to critique Kamala Harris or her campaign without being anti-black or sexist? It's like every 3 to 5 business days, one of y'all comes on this app to spew absolutely nonsense about the upcoming election at the expense of Black and brown people. And or women.
So by now, if you haven't seen it, that little marketing twink, Be Better, has created this TikTok in which he is criticizing Kamala Harris's campaign. What he's saying is egregious.
Be Better has a habit of targeting women and POC above average, if not almost exclusively.
All over a video that has actually aged pretty well, now that we know she lost so bad. So anyway, he released this video in August criticizing Harris and her campaign at a time when she was kind of riding high and Democrats were in full Delulu mode about what an amazing candidate she was and how she was going to slay Trump. But he pushed back in this video where he critiqued her campaign's marketing strategy. Now, we're going to dive deep into Be Better's story and his comeback, but first, a quick message from today's sponsor. I'm a super fidgety person, and I have trouble sitting still without biting my nails or falling into another bad habit. That's why I love today's sponsor, Fume. Fume is a flavored air device that's perfect for anybody who's looking to break away from bad habits, or just wants something enjoyable to use. It's nicotine-free, non-toxic, and completely guilt-free. No batteries, no vapor, and nothing to charge. It's easy to use, safe anywhere, and it looks amazing. Fume has a sleek, high-quality design that anyone will love unboxing. It is not a vape, and it is not addictive, but it's great to fidget with and calm your anxiety. This holiday season, you can give the gift of better habits with Fume. Head to tryfume.com/Brad Polumbo and use code Brad Polumbo to get a free Fume topper when you order a journey pack. It's the perfect perfect edition to make your gift even more special. And if you're lucky, you could even win one of Fume's limited edition gold-plated devices this holiday season. Again, that's tryfume.com/Brad Polumbo, or just scan the QR code on screen now to grab your Fume today or make somebody's holiday unforgettable. Now, back to today's show. His critique had essentially three main points. One was that her campaign was too wrapped up in identity and representation. Two was that she didn't have a coherent policy plan or vision and wasn't laying out specific solutions to the problems that Americans cared about. And three was that she was spending too much time and energy on social media marketing and on celebrity endorsements and not enough time meeting people where they were at. Now, at the time, I watched his video and I didn't agree with every single point, but I thought like the thrust of it was more or less true. I thought the identity politics one, he missed the mark a little bit because it requires some context and some explanation, because Kamala did not run in the few months that she ran a campaign a heavily focused on identity politics campaign. She kind of leaned out of that, actually. However, many of her allies and advocates did push identity politics, and she, for her entire political career before this campaign, did wrap herself in identity politics. Her famous pronoun moments and other kind of woke stuff that she's done over the years. She was very much an identity politics politician until she ran for president. Then she did lean out of it. So that part could have used more nuance and I think wasn't spot on in his original video. But it certainly wasn't a racist or hateful screed or anything like that, yet that was very much how it was received. So I just can't help but feel bad for this guy, because he had the internet viciously bully him. I remember watching all these videos come out at the time. It was really crazy, calling him racist. He was like the main villain of TikTok for days on end. His comment section was just full of hate and pushback. People spread weird conspiracy theories about him secretly being on Trump's payroll that just weren't true, and they called him racist. And he even told me, I spoke with him a little bit to cover this story. He told me they doxed his address and sent him threats all over this. I mean, not perfect, not 100% correct, but this critique of Kamala Harris that proved largely correct, and even at the time was hardly like an extreme or controversial take outside of the echo chamber that is TikTok. So first and foremost, I just want to know when this guy is getting his apology, really, because it is actually wrong and messed up to tar someone as a racist bigot to millions of people without any actual reason to believe that, other than that they made a critique you disagree with of somebody who happens to be a black woman. And I also think this story is interesting because it kind of gets at the problem the Democrats and the progressive side of the spectrum had in the build up to this election. They had this delusional optimism that just was never really matched by the reality on the ground, but they just told themselves that Kamala was so amazing, she was slaying it, she was just going to be an iconic candidate, and they were look how popular her TikToks are, and they just didn't realize that doesn't necessarily translate to support on the ground in key battleground states, and that many of the things about her that this guy, Be Better, did accurately diagnose. For example, when he says that she ran on vague or little policy details, that is true. You don't have to take my word for this. Axios, a center-left news outlet, even labeled Kamala Harris the no-comment candidate because they asked her to clarify her position on 12 different issues, and her campaign declined. They did employ, as Be Better put it, ambiguity as a political strategy, so people could see what they wanted to see in her. A moderate, if they're more moderate, or a progressive, if they're more progressive. That is not a crazy, outlandish theory or some kind of smear. It's actually an astute political observation that he made in his original video that was true then and is true now. In the same way, her use of celebrity endorsements and insane expenditures on those endorsements and events has also aged like milk, and people are very critical of it now. But of course, he was attacked for all of this at the time over a video that wasn't perfect, but in hindsight, got more right than it got wrong. Well, he's now making a comeback after many months away from the spotlight and from creating content on TikTok. And he put out this video responding to this controversy and saying essentially that he thinks the story of his downfall is an insight into the world of social media and what goes wrong when creators dare criticize or stray from the predominant narrative, which he calls the script.
We could analyze the downfall of Be Better. But in order to do this the best way that we can, we actually have to go deeper than we've ever gone before. We have to go all the way to the basement to understand and analyze the physical structure of social media itself. The script acts as a double-edged sword. On the one end, it rewards those who follow it. It rewards them with validation, with followers, and in TikTok's case, with actual money. But on the other side, it also punishes those just as strongly who go off script. And this brings us to the inciting incident of my downfall. Now, I didn't fully know it at the time because I didn't receive my script in the mail, maybe because I'm Canadian. But in August, the script on TikTok was clear. The Harris campaign was infallible, success was inevitable, and anyone who dared to suggest otherwise was committing an act of treason or blasphemy or helping the other side. So I was backstage witnessing a lot of the performers, aka the content creators, who were very deep in their roles and getting tons of praise, adulation, and applause for doing the simplest performances. And I stupidly thought that I could spark a more meaningful conversation I felt needed to be had. So I decided to step on stage in the middle of their performances, and I attempted to speak to the audience directly. And I told them, what you're witnessing is a show. It's not grounded in reality. And if you don't change course now, Donald Trump will win. So the fellow performers sensed the audience's outrage, readjusted their performances, their roles, and then recast me in the play as the villain. And I have to say, they did a fantastic job. Almost overnight, the conversation was immediately directed away from my original critique and laser focused on attacking me personally. Nepo baby, scammer, liar, fraud, Trump supporter. It didn't matter that none of this was true. All that mattered was that it appeased the emotional reactions of the audience and continued the narrative that they had already invested in. They even leaked my home address and encouraged violence against me. So if that doesn't show you the lengths to which people will go to protect the script, I don't know what will.
I think Be Better had a pretty insightful analysis of social media here and how groupthink and herd mentality can lead people astray. And that's why I think this story matters. One, because to me at least, it's a reminder that cancel culture is still very much with us, and we still do have these people on the internet and in progressive dominated spaces who do want to smear anyone who disagrees with them or says something they don't like as a racist and try to silence them and hound them and harass them, bullying them rather than explaining why they're wrong or disagreeing. I mean, anybody was free, and some people did do this to make an earnest critique of Be Better's arguments and say like, hey, this is wrong, this isn't valid, here's why. That's not what I have an issue with. What I have an issue with is the people who harassed him, doxed him, went after his family, called him racist in all these videos, attacked him, went after his company that he does, where he sells like medicinal honeys and other things that has nothing to do with this, and spread bizarre conspiracy theories about him somehow being funded by Trump that I've looked into and simply are not true. Again, this dude is a liberal, and that's what's funny to me. He wanted to work on the campaign of Marianne Williamson, who's like very progressive, more progressive than Kamala. And so they're attacking one of their own who tried to critique Harris from like a, hey, I kind of want her to win, but like she needs to do this better or Trump will win. They attacked their own side for it. And I think that tells you everything you need to know about the modern Democratic Party and why they lost. Remember, why did Kamala Harris refuse to go on Joe Rogan? Not that that one thing would have changed everything, but it would have been a huge opportunity to reach millions of young people, young men in particular, that she needed to sway. And she passed it up because she was afraid her woke staff would get mad at her for engaging with a controversial transphobe or whatever the heck they would have said about it. That is just one example of the kind of brain rot that I think broke her campaign and led it astray. And that shows why the left isn't able to sharpen their candidates and produce top tier candidates to take on Republicans and win elections, because they attack their own side when somebody tries to ever critique what they're doing. There's very much a herd mentality, an echo chamber where different ideas are not tolerated. And that, shocker, does not lead to great ideas and great outcomes and end products. No, the open exchange of ideas and criticisms and critiques, that leads to a sharper, better product in the end. But when you have a herd mentality that people aren't allowed to question, you never go through that important process to separate the wheat from the chaff and actually get your best that your side has to offer. Now, the question I have is, will people really learn anything from this? And sadly, I think the answer to that one is most likely not. But what do you guys think of this story? Let me know in the comments below. Do hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed. And remember to comment with your thoughts, because I do take the time to read the comments and I pick a few to respond to in every episode. Plus, if you leave your comment with a super chat or a super thanks, I'll definitely respond to it on tomorrow's show. And now we've got to talk about Bluesky, the new left-wing Twitter alternative, a social media platform that many progressives have flocked to after abandoning Elon's Twitter because they hate him so much, because some absolutely unhinged stuff is going on over on that platform right now. They are targeting and harassing and threatening and trying to get banned from the site a mainstream liberal journalist and Kamala voter who dared to, at times, critically report on the science around transgender issues in a way that activists don't like. The reporter in question is Jesse Singal, the host of the Blacked Unreported podcast, which I actually guest hosted an episode of and am a huge fan of. And he's a smart, liberal, mainstream journalism guy who reports on trans issues and trans science in a way that is honest, right? It points out that there's no good data justifying this stuff for kids, the medical transitions, and very, very limited data for adults, and they hate him for it. They attack him viciously, and this isn't new, but he tried to join Bluesky because he, as a liberal, thinks Twitter has gotten too right-wing and doesn't want to be in an echo chamber, so he tried to join Bluesky, and all hell broke loose. So when Jesse first joined Bluesky, almost immediately he became the most blocked person on the website, which I find hilarious. Of course, second on the list was Brianna Wu, who had just hosted for an interview on this show, who is a moderate transgender Democrat. It's like they're blocking people from their own side. These are not right-wing people. These are not conservatives or Republicans. But they're mass blocking liberals who sometimes critique their own side in an interest of wanting to promote a better option. Again, so crazy. But that didn't bother me so much, because part of free speech is having the ability to say what you think and express yourself, but also to block people and not listen to them. Like if someone blocks me, they're not violating my free speech. I'm still free to express myself online. They just have chosen not to listen. That's valid. That's their right. I think they're a little intolerant, a little close-minded, but you know what? Block away to your heart's desire. That doesn't bother me so much. What does bother me, though, is the insane change.org petition that the Bluesky progressives have been circulating with more than 25,000 signatures now, trying to get Jesse banned from the website because they don't like his reporting, and spreading some nasty lies about him in the process. This petition demands that Bluesky block Jesse and supposedly enforce its community guidelines, which they are incorrectly claiming he has violated. Many Bluesky users circulated the petition and indicated their support for banning Jesse by basically arguing that his presence on the website makes trans people unsafe somehow. For example, a left-wing account called The Surfs tweeted, "I'd rather every trans person on here feel safe than Jesse Singal feel like he's right." This, of course, makes no sense and is actually kind of condescending towards trans people, as if they're fragile infants who need to be coddled and sheltered from ideas or arguments or information that might not align with their viewpoints. That's not actually true, at least not the mentally stable ones. They don't need that because they're just like anybody else, and as adults can handle different viewpoints and different information. But also, like, what is this idea that anybody is entitled to feel safe and to censor others accordingly? Like, all right, what if I think The Surf's posts make me feel unsafe? Like, should he be blocked from the app? Like, it's just a totally unworkable and subjective standard that is inherently ridiculous. Plus, like we mentioned, they can block Jesse and they don't have to see his posts or his content. So how does him being allowed on the website make them unsafe? I like to try to justify or make sure I can articulate the arguments of the opposing side to make sure I'm not like caricaturing them or strawmanning them, and that I at least understand where they're coming from, even if I ultimately disagree. But with these people, the math is simply not mathing. There is no logic here. It's just raw emotion fueling a push for censorship against a mainstream journalist who does his job. And of course, to justify this, they are lying about him. They're saying incorrectly that he has published minors' medical records without their consent and violated people's privacy. None of this is true. He walks through it on his Substack. The most he's done is publish one sentence from a letter that was written in a patient's file about a trans kid because he reported on the testimony of a whistleblower from a clinic about how these kids were being mistreated and rushed through this process. And the whistleblower reported that one of the kids said they identified as a helicopter. Trans activists said this was a lie. So this whistleblower actually shared a letter, which he quoted a sentence from. There was no identifiable information published. No kid's privacy was violated. This is pretty standard reporting practice. This is not something that's beyond the pale or that he necessarily did incorrectly, and no children were harmed because of it. It's all just kind of hysterical nonsense. Now, I decided that I want to get in on the action, and I am going to be joining Bluesky and creating a profile and seeing how that goes over. Mostly because, you know what? I want to share my work so people see it, even if they disagree, and maybe they engage with it. Maybe I can change their mind, and I want to see what people across the spectrum have to say. And Twitter has become, I think its user base is still somewhat 50-50. I've seen some data, but the posts I see in my feed, at least, are very skewed to the right. Not a lot of progressive perspectives in there. So I want to know what everyone's saying. So I'm joining Bluesky. We'll see if they stay strong. So far, the company has clarified that they're not going to ban Jesse, despite this tremendous pressure to do so. He is the number one most blocked person. Who knows? Maybe I'll make that list. Probably not important or notable enough for that to happen, but we'll see. The other thing, too, is that part of the reason they hate people like Jesse with such a fervor is because he's one of them that pushes back and critiques. Like, he is a liberal. He is a Democrat. He's part of the mainstream media. And yet he criticizes their extreme activism. He pushes back on it. He fact checks them. He reports honestly about research that undercuts alphabet people's agenda. All of this, and they hate that. That's what really bothers them, I think, is when someone from their own side steps in it. Whereas if there's somebody who they perceive as like right wing or far right, like me, even though I'm not, but even though when they perceive someone like that, it doesn't seem to inspire the same level of unhinged psychopathy and hatred and derangement that it does when one of their own crosses the line or aligns with the enemy or prints inconvenient information or does all of these things that they somehow view as so heinous when a journalist does them. To me, this story was really interesting on a couple different levels, but one, just because it shows you where all the crazy people who used to be on Twitter and used to dominate that platform, where they've all gone. It's obvious. It's Bluesky. And it shows you the perils of an echo chamber, right? When you have a space that's just all left-wing people, totally out of touch, even a very liberal, pro-Kamala voter, like person like that is somehow viewed beyond the pale. And what you're doing then, if you consign yourself to a space like that, is you're going to totally lose touch with the public and public opinion. You're not going to see any information that contradicts your worldview, and you're just going to become more extreme and toxic in your own little bubble and then never actually achieve anything because you're going to be totally out of touch with the real world and the American public. So good luck on that front. And the other thing about this that bothered me was the way that many media outlets like this technology news website TechCrunch reported on it and basically just like perpetuated and parroted a bunch of lies about Jesse and the narrative that he's like anti-trans. He's not. He doesn't even support laws restricting access to transitions for minors. He's just a journalist who truthfully reports on information and research. And just parroted this activist framing. They didn't even reach out to him for comment before the article's publication, I don't think. Or he could have told them that many of the things they were going to say aren't true. It's just like very shoddy journalism that shows you again how the media kind of is used and weaponized by these left-wing activists to attack people who speak out against these dogmas. And just on the trans issue in particular, it's just part and parcel of a long trend of intense and often unhinged hostility towards people who criticize the narrative or break with it in any way that unfortunately is kind of par for the course, but is really tragic in many ways because it's not what's in the best interest of actual gender confused youth or transgender people who actually benefit from truthful, honest conversations and investigation into what the research says, what is and isn't justified by the studies. But instead, these activists just want to harass and bully people into shutting up or get them silenced and censored if they won't go away of their own accord. And I, for one, am glad that at least so far, in the case of Jesse Singal, that approach, that censorious and toxic approach, isn't working. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments, and do hit that like button while you're at it. And now it's time for Brad versus TikTok, my daily segment where I take on the craziest ideas from the Clock app.
Pronoun of the day is slugs.
Today, we've got more unhinged woke takes on Wicked, the new movie inspired by the famous musical, who this activist, whose self-described name is Fat Fab Feminist, thinks is actually about fat representation or something. Take a listen.
She may be thin, but to me, Wicked will always be fat representation.
I'm gonna let you finish, but it's kind of a red flag if the person you're saying is fat representation is thin. Like, do words mean anything anymore?
And what I mean by that is if you changed green skin with fatness, would this still work? And in my opinion, absolutely yes.
No, absolutely not. Incorrect. The whole point of the green skin allegory, which closely maps on to maybe something like racism, you could say, but it's that there's something about Alphaba that she cannot change, that makes her different from everyone else, and that she is mistreated because of it. With the rarest of exceptions for unique and uncommon medical conditions that don't account for the vast, vast majority of cases, that is not what fatness is. That is not what obesity is. Obesity is within your control. You can improve your health and lose weight and be more active. And not everyone's going to be a size 0, of course. But when we're talking about people who are morbidly obese, that's almost always a product of their choices and something that they can, in fact, control. So it's actually kind of offensive to people with immutable characteristics to compare your consequences of your bad choices to the things about them they literally can't control, didn't choose, and can't change. No, babe, that's not the same thing at all.
Obviously, spoilers ahead. This story to me is just so relatable because Elphaba's biggest plight is her green skin. It is the first thing that people see when they see her. It is the way that they judge her. So there's 2 instances where she meets people for the first time and she sees their looks at her with like shock or disgust. She goes, "No, I'm not seasick. Yes, I've always been green. No, I didn't eat grass as a child." Already like explaining the questions that she gets regularly because of her outer appearance. And it felt so painfully relatable to me as a fat person, having to justify and explain my fatness, where I say, yes, I've always been fat. Yes, I've tried to diet. No, I'm not eating 10,000 calories a day. And I'm doing this thing where I'm like explaining and justifying my body size, and watching that on screen, it was like, yeah, I've done that.
So this part really did not make sense to me. Am I crazy? And obviously, I actually was obese as a teenager, but I haven't been for most of my life. But it seems doubtful to me. I obviously can't know her experiences, that people routinely interact with a very overweight person and say, "So have you always been fat?" I've never heard anyone ask such a question. I can't imagine asking a fat person I meet that question, and I'm deeply skeptical that that's a regular occurrence, or that people ask her if she eats 10,000 calories a day, or if she's tried dieting. Like, actually, weight's kind of a touchy subject, and people tend not to bring it up or directly ask you about it like that when they're meeting you. So I find that kind of hard to believe. And the other thing is that Alphaba is the only green person in the musical. Whereas, at least in America, like half the country is fat. You're seeing fat people everywhere you go. Being fat is not unique. It is not special. You're not different, right? It's pretty common. So again, this comparison just seems ridiculous to me. It seems like, and these woke people always do this, they just have to make everything about everything, and they don't seem to realize that in doing so, they're actually making things meaningless. Because if something means everything, it also kind of means nothing. But this woman just doesn't get any of this.
But just in general, her entire storyline of like, her skin is the only thing people ever see of her. And obviously, again, this could be, I think, any person who is on the outside can relate to. Just her storyline about like all she's ever wanted. She dreams of meeting the wizard so that he can degreenify her. Me, I used to pray to God every night that he would make me thin, every single night. I used to pray that I would wake up in a different body.
So this part also seems strange to me. The difference here is that Alphaba can't change her green skin without literal magic from the wizard, who, of course, you find out doesn't actually have magic, but that's not the point here. I don't know Fat Fab Feminist's personal health, and maybe she has one of these extremely rare conditions, but even in then, it's typically just much harder to lose weight. It's usually not totally impossible, but for the vast majority of fat people, they don't need magic to lose weight. They need to be more active and eat less and eat better. I'm not saying it's easy. I understand it's tough in many ways, and I have compassion for people who struggle with things like food addiction, with stress eating, who are really busy and have a hard time finding time to exercise. I'm not discounting that. But don't compare it to something you literally can't change without magic, when it is, in fact, largely under your control and within your agency. You're actually denying people their agency and unfortunately probably encouraging them not to take steps and to view themselves as helpless when they are not. That's not a good thing to do, girl. It's not.
This desire to be like truly seen for who you are, not just on the outside but on the inside, and hoping that something magical can just come here and change your outside so that people can actually see your inside. Like that I believe is a quintessential fat experience, you know? It's just so relatable because I used to pray. I'm like, I am a good person. I'm kind of, people just got to know me. If they weren't so small-minded and they looked past my size and they actually got to know me, they would see that I'm a good person, you know?
So I'm sorry if this woman, Fat Fab Feminist, has had bad experiences where people have judged her, not wanted to be her friend, assumed she's a bad person because she's fat. And maybe that's something that morbidly obese people experience, but at least I've never encountered that around me where people refuse to befriend someone because they're overweight. Like, dating is a little different because then it becomes a question of physical attractiveness, but I've never thought that somebody, just because they're very obese, isn't a good person or not wanted to be friends with them. Like that, I don't know how much I believe that's a widespread common sentiment. Of course, to whatever extent it is happening or has happened to her, that is really bad. And I think that's terrible. And my heart goes out to her. But I don't like her framing that as if no one in the world is able to see her as a person or see her as a good person because she's fat. Like, I don't buy that that's the case. I don't.
So yes, like her plight is being green, mine is being fat, but it feels so relatable. And in the movie, they add scenes with young Elphaba. And in the beginning, like she's getting bullied by some kids and like shitty relationship with her parents, which again, like all very relatable. But when she's singing Defying Gravity, she's like falling down and there's like kind of a mirror down the building, and she's falling and she sees the younger version of herself and she reaches out, and to me that was her like finally accepting herself and like, you know, her greenness. And I have such a connection to my younger self and a lot of the things that I do now, or for my younger self who was so unhappy and uncomfortable in her body and thought that all she needed to do was change to be accepted, and then getting to a point where you realize I'm actually okay the way that I am, and either I will be or I won't be accepted, but I'm good.
So unfortunately, you're not good. You're not okay the way you are. You're morbidly obese, and that's likely going to reduce your lifespan by decades. You may well die young and experience very serious health consequences. And in the meantime, your quality of life is, I'm sure, already greatly reduced. None of that is said as an insult or a put down or to make you feel shame or unhappy. That's not what I want. But you also shouldn't be accepting a state that is objectively, factually bad as good and saying, I'm fine the way I am. You're really not, at least not if your goal, like most people, is to live a long, healthy, and fruitful life. And so I do believe that we should encourage people to make peace with the things about themselves that they can't change. But the things they can change, especially the things that aren't just superficial, it's not about aesthetics or just your appearance, although it is nice to look better, but deeply affect your health and your lifespan, yeah, you should want to change that. You shouldn't be making peace with it. Sorry, not sorry. And people who are telling you you're fine the way you are, they may think they're being compassionate or nice, but they're actually not. They're actually lying to you and enabling self-destructive behavior that is going to not be in your own best interests in the long run. The people who are actually, as long as they're not doing so in a cruel manner, which I don't support, the people who are actually supporting you are the ones who are going to be honest with you.
Anyways, this story will always mean so much to me. She might not be fat, but to me, this truly is phenomenal fat representation. And I feel really represented when I see her on screen.
Oh, so again, if you guys are regular viewers, you'll know I liked the movie. But the woke culture around it on the internet, with the cast, with the trigger warnings and all this, is slowly making me hate it, which isn't fair because you should judge art like based on the actual thing, not based on what other people are saying or doing about it. But y'all, you're making this movie suck by being annoying and woke and crazy about it. So if you actually love Wicked and you want it to be popular and spread, maybe stop what you're doing. But that's just my take. You let me know what you think in the comments below. And do remember to hit that like button while you're at it. And now I'll wrap up today's show by reading a few of your comments from recent episodes. First, one person writes on the interview with Brianna Wu, "Great episode, Brad. As a bisexual man, I 100% agree that the new trans activists are negatively affecting the LGBT community as a whole. For this reason, I've become very vocal about my opinions and feelings about the entire topic of trans ideology." Yeah, good for you. I mean, I know a lot of gay, lesbian, and bisexual people, and even trans people who follow me and agree with me, in part because they want to distance themselves from this madness. And I think doing that successfully is the only way we're going to avoid even more backlash. Another person says about the video about the CNN segment with the trans kids who are afraid of being murdered, "Injecting all these fears into multiple innocent children is truly deplorable. Those activists and parents ought to be held accountable." I mean, I agree that it's deplorable, but I don't know what we can do beyond criticizing and pushing back. Another person says, "I do what they call microfeminism by just standing next to young girls at night. Older men or men my age don't approach young girls. If there's a middle-aged woman standing next to them, it feels good to be able to help in that small way. I myself was drugged twice and followed more times than I could as a young teen girl. Thanks for an awesome podcast. I watched it every morning here in Sweden for about a year, I think." Well, thank you so much. And it's so cool to me that I have viewers and listeners from all around the world. I even bumped into one at the stadium when I was doing the stadium tour for Chelsea in London, the soccer team or football team. Somebody working there was a fan of this show and this podcast, and she actually gave me a free photo. They have like professional photos you can take with the trophies, and she let me do it for free. And that was so kind and so amazing. And it's just so cool to me that you guys all across the world support the show and tune into my content. Oh, and as to your point, that's like important. That's the kind of thing that matters, is like protecting women from sexual violence, from harassment, these kinds of things. Like that should be the focus, not like cringeworthy, like microaggressions and all this kind of stuff. Like get rid of that nonsense and focus on the real issues of and problems facing females and women. I mean, that's what matters to me, at least. Another person says, "Kudos, Brad, for drawing a line in the sand regarding attacking these kids. One of the mothers mentioned her kids deserving access to life-saving care. I think this is an example of how these parents are in some ways victims of a corrupt medical establishment that rolled out these protocols without proper research and accompanied by unwarranted threats of suicide as the inescapable outcome of not following them. This really is a scandal on the order of lobotomies." Yeah, I did say that, and I stand by that the trans kids, as they're called, are in many ways victims. They've been misled. Some of the parents are too, honestly. Some of them were told by their doctors their kid would unalive themselves if you don't give them this medicine. So I have compassion for people on all sides of these equations, but it's the activist parents spreading misinformation and baseless fear and scaring the crap out of their kids who I really have contempt for. Another person says, "Perfectly said. These parents need to be held to account. It's unnatural for a 10-year-old to fear assassination. That's all from mom and dad." Yes, it is. And these parents should be ashamed of themselves. But I think they've convinced themselves somehow that they're heroes or something. Another person says, "Hey, Brad, have you considered live streaming? I would love to tune into that. I consider myself a Republican, but really dislike watching super biased people on here. You've really made me reconsider a lot of positions I previously had. I love watching your channel grow." Well, thank you so much. And I also love watching my channel grow. So make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet, because some of you watch regularly but aren't subscribed. And I have considered live streaming, but I do like to think about what I'm going to say and do research beforehand and edit something out if I make a mistake, and to have a little bit more production quality. And just I'm not super keen on live streaming at this moment, but I am. If I do expand and add additional content in addition to the 5 shows a week, I may at some point incorporate a live element. So stay tuned for that. All right, everybody. Thanks again to the sponsor of today's episode, Fume. And thanks to all of you for tuning in. Please do make sure to subscribe if you aren't yet. Do hit that like button before you go. And remember to comment down below with your thoughts. I do take the time to read the comments, and I pick a few to respond to in every episode. Plus, if you leave a comment with a super chat or a super thanks, I'll definitely respond to it on tomorrow's show. And with that, I've got a Chelsea game to get to in a couple of hours, recording this on Sunday, even though you'll hear it on Monday. So here's hoping we win, and we'll talk again tomorrow.